43 cycles of politics taught me one thing: weak species never survived the chamber. Then a human entered, and with one finger proved we were the weak ones. Look, I have been working for the Galactic Council for 43 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. Every pompous declaration, every territorial dispute, every trade negotiation that devolved into screaming matches about tariff rates on crystallized methane. My name is Vex, and I am what you might call a legislative observer, which is a fancy way of saying I stand in the corner with a datapad and card every stupid thing these so-called leaders say for posterity. The council chamber itself is honestly ridiculous. It is this massive circular room, floating in the center of Station Unity, which orbits a perfectly average yellow star in the terminus sector. The architects designed it to be inspiring and inclusive, with seats arranged in concentric rings so that every species could see every other species. What it actually does is create perfect acoustics for insults to echo around the room at least 3 times before fading. The ceiling is this transparent dome that shows the stars beyond, which sounds romantic until you realize it is basically a giant window that makes the whole place freezing cold. The Cryath delegates love it. Everyone else shivers and complains. On this particular day, the day everything changed, the chamber was packed. And I mean absolutely stuffed with representatives from across the known galaxy. The air recyclers were working overtime, trying to process the atmospheric requirements of 63 different species, all breathing, sweating, and in the case of the Glornak delegation, secreting defensive mucus because they were nervous. At the center sat High Chancellor Mordax, a Velthorian with silver scales that shimmered under the chamber lights. He had this way of tilting his head that made him look thoughtful, but really he was just calculating how to phrase things to make himself sound more important. His 3 eyes blinked independently, which I always found deeply unsettling. To his right was Councillor Threen, representing the Aquatic Coalition. She was suspended in a mobile tank of luminescent fluid, her tentacles occasionally pressing against the transparent walls when she got agitated. She had a reputation for being diplomatic, which actually meant she agreed with whoever spoke last. The Kasari delegation occupied an entire section, because of course they did. They are these enormous bird-like creatures with 4 wings and an attitude problem. Their lead counselor, a silver-feathered specimen named Krivak, kept preening and adjusting his ceremonial sash like he was preparing for a photo shoot rather than a political session. Further back sat Ambassador Zoltrix of the mechanized Concordat, whose species had replaced so much of their biology with technology that calling them organic was generous. His optical sensors glowed a steady red, and his voice always came out with this irritating metallic reverb that made everything sound like a threat. The tension in the room that day was not subtle. It was thick, heavy, the kind you could practically taste on your sensory organs. See, the council was about to vote on something that had everyone's scales, feathers, and exoskeletons in a twist. Humanity had formally applied for Tier 2 council status. Now, for those of you not familiar with galactic bureaucracy, and honestly I envy you, Tier 2 status means a species gets actual voting rights on non-emergency matters. It means trade benefits, mutual defense considerations, and worst of all for the current council members, it means sharing power. Humans had been Tier 3 members for only 12 cycles. 12. Most species wait at least 50 cycles before even thinking about applying for Tier 2. But here they were, humanity, these weird bipedal mammals from a backwater planet they called Earth, having the audacity to ask for a promotion. The murmuring in the chamber sounded like a swarm of insects, if those insects were politically connected and deeply annoyed. I could hear snippets of conversation from my corner. The Glornak were whispering about inappropriate ambition. The Kasari were making comments about primitive species. Even the usually neutral Sindari were shaking their crystalline heads in what I assumed was disapproval. High Chancellor Mordax raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. Well, mostly silent. Someone in the Aquatic Coalition section was still making bubbling sounds, but Threen smacked her tank with a tentacle and that stopped. "We convene today," Mordax began, his voice carrying that practiced authority that politicians spend years perfecting, "to address the application of species designation human, catalog reference Sol 3, for elevation to Tier 2 council status." He paused dramatically, which was completely unnecessary but very on-brand for him. "Let the debate commence." And oh, the debate commenced all right. It commenced so hard that I filled up 3 data pads with recordings. But none of us, not a single soul in that chamber, was prepared for what was about to happen. For what she was about to do with just one finger. Counselor Krivak was the first to speak, because of course he was. He ruffled his silver feathers and stood to his full height, which was impressive if you are into that sort of thing. I personally found it compensatory, but nobody asked me. High Chancellor, esteemed colleagues, he began, his beak clicking with each syllable, I must express my profound concern. No, my absolute bewilderment at this application before us today. He gestured with one wing toward the empty human delegation seat, which was still vacant. The humans had not arrived yet, and Krivak was clearly enjoying their absence. Humanity requests Tier 2 status after a mere 12 cycles. 12! My species spent 70 cycles proving our worth, demonstrating our stability, our technological contributions, our cultural sophistication. He preened again, because apparently making a point required constant feather maintenance. What have humans contributed? They arrive in our galaxy with primitive fusion drives, barely functional translation technology, and the social structure of a feudal collective. Several council members chirped, clicked, and hummed in agreement. Ambassador Zaltrix's optical sensors brightened, which I had learned meant he was pleased. Furthermore, Krivak continued, warming to his subject like a performer who had finally found his audience, their planet is a Class 12 death world. They evolved dodging predators, surviving pathogens, and fighting each other over frozen water and decomposed organic matter. This is not the foundation of a civilized species. This is barely controlled chaos. Counselor Threen's tentacles rippled in her tank. I must concur with my esteemed colleague. The psychological profiles we have compiled suggest humans are emotionally unstable, prone to violence, and lack the rational detachment necessary for proper governance. Just last cycle, we received reports of humans forming emotional attachments to small domesticated predators they keep in their living spaces. They call them cats and create digital imagery of them for entertainment purposes. This is not serious species behavior. The chamber erupted in what I can only describe as polite laughter, which is somehow more insulting than regular laughter. It is laughter with restraint, laughter that says I am too sophisticated to laugh openly at you, but I definitely think you are ridiculous. High Chancellor Mordax did not stop them. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence, and I swear I saw amusement in all of them. That was when the chamber doors opened. The laughter died faster than a Glornak in hard vacuum. She walked in like she owned the station, and maybe in some cosmic sense, she did. Her name was Commander Maya Torres, and I had seen her file, former military, which explained the way she moved, purposeful, efficient, like every step was calculated. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with minimal decoration, just a small patch showing Earth's continents and a rank insignia on her shoulder. What struck me immediately was how utterly unimpressed she looked. Her dark eyes scanned the chamber with the kind of casual assessment that predators do when entering new territory. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her brown skin seemed to absorb the chamber's light rather than reflect it. She was not tall by human standards, maybe average, but she carried herself like she was 10 feet tall and made of titanium. She did not hurry. She did not apologize for being late. She simply walked to the human delegation seat, set down a slim data tablet, and sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the table before her. The silence stretched. Krivak's beak hung slightly open, his prepared speech clearly derailed by her entrance. Commander Torres smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had heard every word said in her absence and found it mildly amusing at best. Please, she said, her voice clear and carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. Do continue. I believe you were explaining why my species is too primitive for Tier 2 status. Something about cats, was it? Her tone was polite, professionally courteous, and somehow that made it worse. Counselor Threen's tentacles curled defensively in her tank. High Chancellor Mordax cleared his throat, which in Velthorian physiology sounds like rocks grinding together. Commander Torres, welcome. We were merely engaging in the standard deliberative process regarding your species application. Standard, she repeated, her smile never wavering. Yes, I imagine mocking applicants in their absence is quite standard here. Krivak ruffled his feathers indignantly. We were not mocking, we were evaluating. Based on observable facts and documented behavioral patterns, your species has a concerning history of internal conflict, irrational decision-making, and emotional volatility. I see, Commander Torres said. She leaned back in her chair completely relaxed, like she was sitting in her own living quarters rather than facing a council of species that had just spent 20 minutes explaining why humans were too stupid to join their club. Tell me, Counselor Krivak, how many wars has your species fought in the last century? His beak clicked. That is irrelevant to the current discussion. Humor me, she said. 7, he admitted, his feathers flattening slightly. But they were territorial disputes, trade disagreements, entirely rational conflicts with clear objectives and negotiated resolutions. Right, rational wars. Got it, she said, nodding like she was taking notes. And how many has humanity fought in the same period? This was clearly a trap, and even Krivak could sense it, but he had committed to the path. According to our intelligence, approximately 42 armed conflicts of various scales. 47 actually, Commander Torres corrected. But who is counting? And do you know how many of those we won? The chamber was silent. All of them, she said quietly. Every single one. Even the ones where we were fighting ourselves, which I admit is confusing, but statistically accurate. Ambassador Zoltrix's sensors flashed. This proves our point exactly. Humanity is a violent, war-driven species unsuitable for civilized governance. And that was when it happened. Commander Torres raised her hand slowly, deliberately, and extended a single finger, the middle one, specifically. She held it up for exactly 3 seconds, her expression never changing from that polite professional mask, and then lowered it calmly back to the table. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that nobody in that chamber knew what to do with that gesture. Counselor Threen's tentacles pressed against her tank in confusion. Is that a human greeting? A numerical designation? Perhaps a symbolic representation, suggested one of the Glornik delegates, their mucus secretion increasing nervously. A measurement system. 1 finger, 1 unit of something. Krivak tilted his head at multiple angles, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Commander Torres, could you explain the significance of that gesture? We wish to understand your cultural expression. Oh, the look on her face. I have that expression burned into my memory banks forever. It was pure distilled satisfaction mixed with barely contained amusement. Oh, you want an explanation? She asked, her voice dripping with false innocence. Of course I apologize. Cultural differences and all, that gesture, esteemed council members, is what we call flipping the bird. It is a traditional human expression that roughly translates to, I have heard your opinion, I have evaluated your opinion, and I have determined that your opinion has approximately the same value as the waste products my species excretes after consuming nutrients. The chamber erupted. Not in laughter this time. In outrage, confusion, and what I can only describe as fascinated horror. This is outrageous, Krivak squawked, literally squawked. You insult this council with primitive hand signals. Oh no, Commander Torres said, holding up both hands in mock defense. I would never insult this council. That would be inappropriate and unprofessional. I was simply demonstrating a cultural practice, as you specifically requested clarification. If you feel insulted, well, that is entirely your interpretation. High Chancellor Mordax's scales had shifted from silver to a darker, angrier shade. Commander Torres, this council deserves respect. We are the governing body of 78 civilized species across 42 sectors. Respect, she repeated. And now the politeness was gone from her voice. Now it was steel. You want to talk about respect? You spent the last 20 minutes calling my species primitive, violent, emotionally unstable, and unfit for governance. You mocked our evolutionary history, our culture, even our pets. And now you demand respect? She stood up, placing both hands flat on the table, leaning forward slightly. Every eye, optical sensor, and sensory organ in the chamber was locked on her. Here is what you actually respect, Chancellor. You respect power. You respect resources. You respect anything that makes you look more important or more secure. But the moment a species shows up that might challenge your comfortable little hierarchy, you suddenly develop very strong opinions about who deserves a seat at the table. Ambassador Zoltrix's voice modulator crackled. You are proving our assessment correct. Emotional, aggressive, unsuitable. Commander Torres smiled again. and this time it was genuinely amused. "Oh, Ambassador Zoltrix, I have not even started being aggressive yet. Right now, I am being polite. Trust me, you really do not want to see the alternative." She sat back down, folded her hands again, and waited. The council members exchanged glances, chirps, and bioluminescent signals. They were rattled. All of them. This was not how Tier 2 applications usually proceeded. "Perhaps," High Chancellor Mordak said slowly, "we should move to the formal evaluation portion of this session." "Finally," Commander Torres said. "A reasonable suggestion, please. Evaluate away." High Chancellor Mordax gestured toward the central projection system, clearly expecting Commander Torres to present some kind of standard diplomatic portfolio. Technical specifications, trade proposals, cultural achievements neatly packaged in colorful graphs and charts, the usual bureaucratic performance. What she did instead was tap her data tablet twice, and the entire chamber's holographic system lit up with something completely different. "Let me start," Commander Torres said, her voice cutting through the murmuring like a blade, "by addressing Councillor Krivak's concerns about our primitive technology and chaotic social structure." The hologram shifted to display a three-dimensional schematic of a human warship. Not one of their sleek diplomatic vessels, mind you. This was a military dreadnought, the kind humans apparently named Everest, after one of their enormous mountains. This vessel was constructed in orbit around our moon exactly 8 cycles ago. Full integration of pulse-wave weapons, adaptive shielding that learns from incoming fire patterns, and a jump drive that can cross 16 sectors in the time it takes your species to file a proper flight plan. Krivak's feathers rippled. "Impressive engineering, certainly, but hardly—" "I am not finished," she interrupted smoothly. "This ship was designed, built, and deployed during what we call peacetime. When humans are not actively fighting anyone, this is what we create for fun. Would you like to see what we built during our last major conflict?" The hologram shifted again. This time it showed something that made even Ambassador Zoltrix's sensors flicker with what might have been concern. It was a weapon platform, compact, efficient, and according to the specifications scrolling beside it, capable of reducing a small moon to its constituent atoms in approximately 4 minutes. "We called this one Peacemaker," Commander Torres said, and I swear there was dark humor in her voice. "Human irony. We built 600 of them in 18 months, while simultaneously negotiating 3 separate peace treaties. Multitasking is a survival trait when you evolve on a death world." Councillor Threen's tentacles had gone completely still in her tank. "Commander, are you threatening this council?" "Threatening?" Torres looked genuinely confused. "No, Councillor. I am educating. You claimed we lack technological sophistication. I am simply correcting the record. Now let us address the accusation about emotional instability and irrational behavior." The hologram changed to display what appeared to be historical records. Dates, events, diplomatic negotiations spanning human history. "My species has conducted successful diplomatic relations with over 200 distinct cultural groups on our own planet alone, often while those groups were actively trying to kill each other. We have peace treaties that have lasted centuries. We have international organizations that coordinate everything from disease prevention to space exploration. And yes, we have also fought wars, because sometimes violence is the only rational response to certain problems." She paused, letting that sink in. Councillor Krivak mentioned his species fought 7 wars in the last century, all resolved through negotiation. "Impressive. Would you like to know how humanity resolved our last major planetary conflict?" Krivak said nothing, but his beak clicked nervously. "We developed a weapon so catastrophically powerful that using it would guarantee mutual destruction for everyone involved. And then instead of using it, we looked at each other and collectively decided that maybe, just maybe, we should try talking instead. We call it mutually assured destruction, and it kept an entire planet from killing itself for 6 decades. That is not emotional instability, Councillor. That is rational fear applied correctly." Ambassador Zoltrix's voice modulator crackled to life. "You are describing a species that holds itself hostage to prevent self-annihilation. This is hardly a recommendation for governance. Is it not?" Commander Torres leaned forward. "Tell me, Ambassador, what did the mechanized Concordat do when the Silicate Rebellion threatened your core worlds 20 cycles ago?" The chamber went very quiet. I checked my historical files rapidly. Oh no. Oh, this was going somewhere uncomfortable. We negotiated a settlement, Zoltryk said, his tone defensive. You surrendered 3 entire systems and paid tribute for 12 cycles, Torres corrected, her voice sharp as broken glass. Because your species, for all your technological augmentation, could not stomach the casualties required to put down the rebellion militarily. Meanwhile, humanity fought a civil war that killed 600 million of our own people rather than let our planet be divided. We value unity over individual survival. You might call that irrational. We call it commitment. She tapped her tablet again. A hologram now showed a rotating image of Earth itself, blue and green and white, spinning peacefully in the projection. You called our planet a Class 12 death world like it was an insult. Let me tell you about Class 12 death worlds, esteemed council members. Our gravity is higher than 70% of inhabited worlds in this galaxy. Our atmospheric oxygen content would be toxic to half the species in this room. We have weather patterns that can level cities, tectonic activity that reshapes continents, predators that evolved specifically to hunt us, microorganisms that have killed more humans than all our wars combined. Her voice rose slightly, passion bleeding through the professional facade. And we thrived. We did not just survive, we dominated. We climbed to the top of the food chain on a planet actively trying to kill us, and then we looked up at the stars and said, what else is out there? That is not chaos, Counselor Threen. That is adaptation. That is resilience. That is exactly what you should want in a Tier 2 species. Because when the next crisis hits, and it always does, you want someone at the table who knows how to take a punch and keep fighting. I found myself nodding along before I caught myself. This was not professional. I was supposed to be objective, neutral, recording without bias. But she was making points that were difficult to ignore. The Glornak delegation was secreting so much mucus their seats were becoming slippery. The Sundari were vibrating at frequencies I had never seen before. Even High Chancellor Mordax looked unsettled, his scales shifting through colors I did not have names for. Commander Torres pulled up one final hologram. It was a simple chart, clean and devastating. Finally, let us discuss contributions. In 12 cycles, humanity has shared 37 significant technological innovations with the galactic community. We have participated in 14 joint scientific expeditions. We have provided humanitarian, or I suppose multi-speciesitarian, aid to 6 different worlds facing natural disasters. And we have asked for nothing in return except fair trade and the opportunity to prove ourselves. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting as many eyes and optical sensors as possible. So please, tell me again how we are too primitive for Tier 2 status. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks, when the air pressure drops, and every creature with functional survival instincts knows something big is about to happen. High Chancellor Mordax was the first to recover, because politicians are nothing if not resilient when their authority is challenged. His scales shifted back toward their neutral silver, and he arranged his features into what probably passed for diplomatic composure among Valthorians. Commander Torres, your presentation is certainly comprehensive, he began, carefully choosing each word like he was navigating a minefield. However, this council must consider not only technological capability and military strength, but also cultural compatibility and long-term stability within the galactic framework. Cultural compatibility, Commander Torres repeated, her tone suggesting she knew exactly where this was going. Please, elaborate. Before Mordax could respond, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Rin, representing the Talmor Confederacy, activated his speech indicator. The Talmor were insectoid, covered in iridescent chitin, and they rarely spoke during council sessions unless they had something important to say. High Chancellor, if I may, Rin's voice buzzed through his translator. I believe we are approaching this evaluation incorrectly. Every head, sensor, and appendage in the chamber turned toward him. The Talmor Confederacy has had direct trade relations with humanity for 8 cycles. In that time, they have been prompt, fair, and remarkably adaptive to our communication styles. When our colony on Talmor 6 faced a crystalline plague outbreak, human medical researchers arrived within 2 days and worked alongside our physicians until a treatment was developed. They asked for no payment, no territory, no concessions. They simply helped. He paused, his antennae twitching in what I recognized as their species' version of emphasis. I find it difficult to reconcile that behavior with accusations of emotional instability and unsuitability for governance. Councillor Krivak's feathers flattened aggressively. Ambassador Rin, your personal experiences do not override the broader security and stability concerns that you invented to justify maintaining your own influence, came another voice. This time it was Councillor Merrick's of the Outer Rim Coalition. A mammalian species with silver fur and sharp teeth, they were currently showing in what might have been a smile. Let us be honest about what this is really about. The Kesari hold significant military contracts with 40% of Tier 2 species. If humanity gains Tier 2 status, their superior weapons technology suddenly becomes available for competitive bidding. That is what concerns you, Krivak, not their emotional stability. The chamber erupted into competing voices, clicks, buzzes, and modulated sounds. I was frantically trying to record everything, my data pad working overtime. Krivak stood to his full height, wings spreading. How dare you accuse me of acting in self-interest, Merrick's interrupted. Please, we all do it, but at least I am honest about it. The Outer Rim Coalition votes in favor of humanity's application. High Chancellor Mordax raised his clawed hand for silence, but it took several attempts before the chamber calmed. His three eyes were blinking rapidly, a sign of stress. This is highly irregular, he said. The formal vote is not scheduled until you have had time to pressure enough council members to ensure the outcome you prefer, Commander Torres interjected sweetly. Yes. I understand how parliamentary procedure works, Chancellor. Ambassador Zoltrix's sensors flared bright red. The commander speaks out of turn. This is a deliberative body with established protocols. Protocols that apparently include insulting applicants before they arrive and then acting surprised when they object, Torres shot back. Forgive me if I am not impressed by your protocols. Councillor Threen's tentacles rippled anxiously in her tank. Perhaps we should table this discussion and reconvene after a cooling-off period. Clearly emotions are running high. Only human emotions though, right, Councillor? Torres asked. When Krivak performs his territorial display with the feather spreading and the posturing, that is rational debate. When I point out factual inconsistencies in your arguments, that is emotion. Interesting double standard. More voices joined the chaos. I could see the chamber fracturing in real time. Species that had remained neutral were suddenly activating their speech indicators, demanding to be heard. The aquatic coalition was splitting internally, with 3 delegates contradicting Threen's position. Even some of the mechanized Concordat representatives seemed to be having heated discussions with Ambassador Zoltrix, their optical sensors flashing in disagreement. High Chancellor Mordax looked like he was aging 10 cycles in 10 minutes. His carefully constructed consensus was collapsing, and everyone in the chamber could see it. Order, he shouted, his voice echoing 3 times around the chamber. We will have order, or I will clear this chamber and postpone the vote indefinitely. Commander Torres smiled and said nothing. She did not need to. The chaos was doing her work for her. It took High Chancellor Mordax nearly 15 minutes to restore enough order for the vote to proceed. 15 minutes of arguing, posturing, and what I can only describe as political panic from species suddenly realizing their comfortable power structure was being challenged by mammals who evolved, dodging apex predators. We will now proceed to a formal vote, Mordax announced, his voice strained. All in favor of granting humanity Tier 2 Council status, activate your approval indicators. The voting board lit up like a star chart. Green indicators appeared across the display, far more than I expected. The Talamor Confederacy voted yes immediately. The Outer Rim Coalition followed. Then the Sindari, whose crystalline structures were pulsing with what looked like approval. The smaller delegations, species who had been silent throughout the entire debate, started adding their votes one by one. I watched Councillor Krivak's face as the count climbed. His feathers were completely flat now, pressed against his body in what I recognized as their species' expression of defeat. The aquatic coalition was divided, with Threen voting no but 2 of her subordinate delegates breaking ranks to vote yes. Ambassador Zoltrix voted no, obviously, but even some of the mechanized Concord delegates defected. When the final count appeared, my central processor nearly glitched. 41 in favor. 22 opposed. Humanity had won. Not narrowly. Decisively. High Chancellor Mordax stared at the board like it had personally betrayed him. The vote is recorded. By council mandate, humanity is hereby granted Tier 2 status, effective immediately, with all associated rights, responsibilities, and privileges. He sounded like he was announcing his own funeral. Commander Torres stood slowly, gathering her data tablet with careful precision. She looked around the chamber, and I swear she made eye contact with every single delegate who had voted against her. "Thank you, High Chancellor, esteemed council members," she said, her voice perfectly professional now, all traces of sarcasm carefully filed away. "Humanity looks forward to contributing to the continued prosperity and security of the Galactic Council. We promise to bring the same dedication, innovation, and emotional instability that got us here today." That last part, that tiny barb, delivered with a straight face. Beautiful. Kriva could not help himself. "Commander Torres, I hope you understand that Tier 2 status comes with significant expectations. You will be held to the same standards as all council members." "Oh, Counselor," Torres said, and now the smile was back, sharp and dangerous. "We are counting on it." She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber doors, looking back over her shoulder. "One more thing. That weapon platform I showed you earlier, the Peacemaker, we actually built 800 of them, not 600. We just did not see the need to mention all of them during a friendly diplomatic session. Seemed like it might come across as threatening." The doors closed behind her before anyone could respond. I stood in my corner, datapad clutched in my appendages, and had what I can only describe as a moment of clarity. We had underestimated them. Badly. We saw their short time in the galaxy and assumed inexperience. We saw their violent history and assumed instability. We saw their emotional attachments and assumed weakness. We were wrong about all of it. Humans were not unstable. They were unpredictable, which in galactic politics might actually be more dangerous. They were not primitive. They were efficient, building in 12 cycles what took other species 50. And they were definitely not weak. They were restrained, which is a completely different thing and far more terrifying when you think about it. Around me, the council chamber was erupting in arguments about what this meant for trade agreements, military alliances, territorial boundaries. The entire political landscape had shifted in less than an hour. And somewhere on that blue and green death world they called home, humanity was probably celebrating. Or perhaps, more likely, they were already working on whatever came next. Because that is what humans do. They keep moving forward, whether you are ready for them or not. High Chancellor Mordax slumped in his seat, all three eyes closed. "We are going to regret this," he muttered. I made a note in my datapad. He was probably right. So, what have I learned from 43 cycles of legislative observation, culminating in the most dramatic council session in recorded galactic history? Let me share some wisdom with you, free of charge, because apparently nobody else is going to say it out loud. First lesson, never, and I mean never, insult a species before checking exactly how many weapons they have pointed at your homeworld. Turns out humanity had been polite up until that moment, and politeness should not be confused with weakness. It is actually the opposite. It means they are choosing restraint, and choice implies options you probably do not want to think about too hard. Second lesson, Death World species are Death World species for a reason. They did not survive by being friendly and accommodating. They survived by being adaptable, resilient, and occasionally terrifying when circumstances required it. Humans smile with their teeth showing. Think about that. They bear their primary weapons as a greeting. What kind of species does that unless they are so confident in their position that they can afford to be casual about threat displays? The galactic political landscape changed overnight after that vote. Within 3 cycles, humanity had negotiated defense pacts with 12 species, including some who voted against them. Apparently humans do not hold grudges when there is profit involved, which is somehow both practical and unsettling. Trade routes shifted, technology exchanges accelerated, and suddenly all those species who spent decades climbing the diplomatic ladder were looking over their shoulders at the newcomers who sprinted past them in 12 cycles. Councillor Krivak retired 4 cycles later. Officially it was for health reasons. Unofficially his military contracts dried up when everyone started buying human weapon systems instead. The free market is cruel like that. High Chancellor Mordax is still in office, but he looks older now, tired. He approved 3 more human initiatives last month without even arguing. I think he finally learned the same lesson I did. As for me, my perspective has shifted considerably. I used to think my job was boring, recording the predictable machinations of established powers playing their familiar games. Now I understand I have a front-row seat to something historic. Humanity is not just joining the galactic community. They are reshaping it whether we like it or not. Here is my warning to any species considering challenging humanity in the future. That single finger Commander Torres raised. That was a message, yes, but not the one we thought. It was not just an insult. It was a promise. One finger now, but they have 9 more, and we have no idea what gestures those might represent. So take my advice, learn from watching the whole thing unfold with my own sensors. When a human smiles at you and asks if you would like to see what they are capable of, the correct answer is always no, because if they are asking, they already know the answer will terrify you, and they are just being polite about it. And as we established earlier, human politeness is not weakness. It is a warning.